Alright, so we're back with another PS2 action game. My only experience with Nano Breaker was some snippets of gameplay, and that's pretty much it. No one's really talked about this game in general, let alone how it plays and its mechanics, so I'm pretty interested, especially with such a high note we started out with on Zoe 2. So let's check it out. But first, this is Combat Overview. In this series I go over the general controls, to the game's main mechanic or mechanics, who or what we use those tools on, and then seeing how it comes together. Bit more in depth, but that's what I do. Alright, so let's begin. On square we have our quick light attacks, and triangle is our heavies, which are just as quick. Alright, and oof, okay, look at that damage output. Light attacks are super weak, but heavies are just as fast and deal way more damage. That's pretty strange. So what's the point of lights then? Yeah, that was pretty much my train of thought at the time when I saw that. But as I try to pay attention as to why it's like this, it hit me. If you notice, they have horizontal and vertical swipes to them. So don't see them as light and heavies, but directional attacks instead. Square will always do horizontal swipes, making them more of a quick get off me attack, while triangle attacks vertically, and is best to hit low or airborne enemies. Basically, triangle focuses on one target, which means more damage dealt to that one thing, and since square has a wider range, the damage is spread out. So in that sense, it adds up to me. But that's just their attack properties, because we still have enders, which I'll go into a bit later. Alright, while holding R1 and square, we'll do this far poke that'll end by sending an enemy away, and floors them. It's really good as a spacing and punish tool, especially useful on bosses. We also have a launcher, not super great as a combo starter like you would expect. You can't juggle them with other hits, or jump after them, or anything like that. It's just a way to toss someone up and floor them. Same end result as the poke, it's just the positioning that's the difference. One keeps them close, and the other sends them away. On circle we have this far grab or capture, which is what it's called here. And yeah, kind of looks familiar. But yeah, holding it, it lets you pick your targets, and as you bring them in, pressing square or triangle would do this critical strike that usually kills in one hit. But the timing for this is extremely tight, so it's a powerful follow-up, but it requires some strict time presses, which that timing is always different depending on the distance you pull them in, and yeah, either way, super satisfying once you get it down. Okay. Now I'm going to circle back around to enders. The main two that everything pretty much builds off from is this crowd controlled 360 sweep starting from square. Now on triangle we have the stunner to keep someone still by giving a bonk to their head. Simple enough, and they both have distinct uses from each other, which is great. But now let's get into the little crazier side of the enders and combo routes. We get stronger versions later on depending on how deep the combo is, like spawning a scythe or this axe to drop on somebody. They do good damage, but as you lay a beat down on enemies, consistently staying on the aggressive, you have these wings come out, letting you know your limiters are off, which means some specific enders will now affect enemies more than before. That scythe will now slice someone in half, and the axe will split somebody in two. But they won't do that if the limiters are on, keep that in mind. So you need to be in this powered up state, which doesn't last too long, and use that to your advantage to use specific combo routes to reach powerful enders, with now an extra buff to them that affects enemy states more effectively than before. But with the distinction between horizontal and vertical attacks, like we saw, you still need to choose the right one depending on enemy types. Because cutting this jobber in half, for example, they'll live afterwards becoming a crawling enemy to attack at your ankles, still being this little nuisance. So next time cut them down the middle with the axe to actually finish them off. And this carries over to other enemies as well. Like cutting the shield enemies with the axe will have them spill out puddles of goo that'll hurt and slow you down. So you gotta figure out which direction hard counters certain enemy types, because if not, they're just gonna turn into a new enemy pretty much, which is a cool idea. Now, to even get these routes, you need to place different Lembo combo chips you find into these nodes, which leads into longer combos and split paths. So this opens up ways to flow back into other tools we have, or to extend combos before ending them with a launcher, a stinger, or that killing blow finisher once the limiters are off. So combat here is all about using those unique tools correctly to stay on the advantage, which rewards you with the short powered up state to help further that pressure, quickly wrap up enemies with those correct enders. Pretty solid loop. Now onto our defenses. Holding R1 will guard, which has a semicircle coverage in front of you, but get hit directly behind and you'll take that damage. If you press X while guarding, you'll roll, but only in 4 directions, and it does have some iframes, but that active window is small, plus it doesn't cancel attacks, neither does blocking, by the way. Yeah, I wouldn't consider the roll a reliable way to evade attacks, useful in situations for sure, but not a get out of free jail card all the time. But that just makes you space enemies out and bait out the options, which is pretty fun in that way. And hey, if you get hit, tapping R1 right before you land will break your fall. On the HUD, we got our health, and beneath it is our boost meter. And this icon on the left is our boosters, sub-weapons basically. To use them, hold R1 and circle to use some meter to either explode and damage everyone near you, summon orbs to surround you which can juggle enemies a bit, or give yourself some hyper armor so combos won't be interrupted, and more. So they're just little boosts to help in a fight. Not super necessary, but can be very useful. And the gallons is just your total XP pretty much. As you kill enemies, they'll douse you in the oil, and every 2000 will automatically give you upgrades like permanent increase to your health or boost meter. Just those two major upgrades, which is your only incentive to fight. So if you want, you can just walk past everyone, but at times the game will lock you into fights like we've been used to since DMC1. When it comes to enemies, we have jobbers that approach you head on and swing once they're close enough. These shrimp looking things that can't be damaged by your attacks, so to open them up you need to launch them first, flipping them over to finish them off. Big guys who will lunge at you if you're too close. They can't be launched because of their size, but can be stunned with the bonk and floored by our stinger. So there's ways to space them out and ways to keep them still to get hidden. Walking shields who will always try to face you, so you gotta bait them out into attacking so you can quickly get behind them. Little shooters, which their projectiles can be reflected back with the timed block, and this pistachio looking enemy that opens up in different ways to show what type of beam is about to shoot out. So you'll either jump over or sidestep it. There's more, but there's a cool little mix here. Now the bosses are pretty fun too. They have their own pattern and gimmick to them, which helps create these unique back and forth fights. One of the bosses you're legit tossed into a Beyblade battle. And of course we have the rival to clash with throughout the game. Has you spacing and baiting options out of each other, at the same time trying to see what each other learned along the way since the last fight. And that's Nano Breaker. I thought it was great. Just a perfect example of a 6th generation action game in its purest form, and that's why I enjoyed it so much. Plus it's not just the combat we mess with, because as you get deeper into the island one area after the next, not only do we see new enemies, but we also have different stage hazards and platforming bits to keep things fresh. Like the scrap heap area for example, as soon as you get there, they already use that idea to create fun set pieces based on that. How this claw follows you before trying to crush you, how you gotta fight on this conveyor belt and knock enemies into the roller to break it, stuff like that. So just one standout area to another that'll change up the stage mechanics to the end. And once you beat the game, you unlock Keith, the rival character. He plays similar to Jake, which makes sense. Rivals are usually mirror images for the most part. He does have his own sub-weapons, which are really fun since they're literally boss attacks, because he's a goddamn powerhouse. Plus, he's fully kitted out at the start, so even though you need to get max health and meter upgrades again, he's good to go right at the start. He also has different combo routes than Jake, making him different, and just like in the story, Keith permanently removed his limiters, so his ender's always doing those killing blows. So yeah, again, just a super solid game. Nano Breaker dabbles with hitbox importance and how that affects enemies, its choice of combo routes creating your own moveset in a way, and little combo visualizers to go with it. Which all sounds like Godhound, right? But Nano Breaker actually came out a whole year before it. Nano Breaker even has the rival as a playable character before DMC3 Special Edition added Virgil in it. Also has Devilbringer Snatch before Nero in DMC4, and all while you're playing as a cyborg killing machine with a war-ridden past having you slice people in two before riding in Rising Revengeance. Of course, all those later action games took those concepts a lot further, but I think Nano Breaker deserves some credit and should be remembered as a solid action game that brought some cool ideas and features along with it.